Hello, and welcome to Tech Latest from Nikkei Asia, where we bring you the freshest updates from the technology sector in Asia. From Nikkei Asia's Tokyo headquarters, I'm your host, Katey Creel. This week, we're joined by Cissy Zhou in Hong Kong, talking to us about China's e-commerce sector and the all-important Singles' Day shopping extravaganza. Welcome to the show, Cissy.
Hi, Katey. Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure. So today we're going to be talking about online sales and, most importantly, Singles' Day. It's the biggest online sales event in China, maybe the world, and it got its start back in 2009, I believe, with Alibaba. But the concept of a Singles' Day holiday actually has been around a bit longer than that. Can you tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, sure. So, Singles' Day in China started as a quirky anti-Valentine's Day for single people back in the 90s, actually. And then people noticed that the date, double 11, was full of ones, one. And it looked like 4 people standing alone. And then in 2009, Alibaba saw this as the perfect opportunity for a shopping event. And then they argued that, bachelors should treat themselves on this day. So they launched massive discounts on November 11th. And it was a hit and worked so well.
It's a brilliant move.
Yeah.
So it was a hit right away. There was no backlash, or?
Well, so initially, it was just a one-day event and was only on Alibaba's Taobao. And many people would put items in their shopping carts in advance. And when the clock strikes midnight on the 11th, they start frantically clicking to pay, because if the clicks are too slow, items would be quickly sold out. So it was really, really crazy at the start.
Exciting and high stakes, yeah.
Yeah. And then it grew so fast and became the world's largest shopping festival, with sales even beating Black Friday.
That's amazing. Did Alibaba not mind that other platforms were trying to get in on the same action, or did they figure that the more people who were shopping on this day, the better, because it got everyone excited?
Yeah, people are really excited, but because e-commerce competition in China is fierce. So actually, right after Alibaba launched the Singles Day event, JD.com, one of its biggest rival all time, launched their own shopping festival the next year in 2010, which is called June 18th Shopping Festival.
But these days, most of the kind of big shopping event is around the month leading up to November 11th. Is that right?
Yeah. So it's getting longer and longer, extending from 1 day to 1 week, and then 3 weeks, and now it's around 1 month. Also, so as I mentioned, because in the past few years or in the past 15 years, more shopping festivals in different names had been invented by different platforms, and people sort of started to be, bored about it. And because we have seen all those, shopping festivals in various names, and they lasting longer and longer, and the consumer enthusiasm started to wane as China's economic growth slows.
I can see that when you start off with just one special day that everyone's clicking frantically on, then to stretch it out to a month, it's almost like having your birthday for 30 days.
Yeah, exactly.
So this year's Singles' Day has just wrapped up. Have we seen any numbers from the major platforms yet? And how are they looking?
Yeah, so actually from 2022, platforms have stopped to release the total sales number. And this year, none of the platforms released any total sales either, which was completely expected. And Alibaba said early this week that it achieved robust GMV growth and a record number of active buyers during this year's Singles' Day. But that was very tricky because this year's Singles' Day is the longest in history and lasted 29 days. Well, last year 19 days.
Oh.
So they are 10 days more. So we have no idea if the robust growth is a comparison over the same length of time or yet. But something interesting from last year is that last year, the data provider seen to a lot of media outlets, including us, used to cite, they estimated that total GMV across major e-commerce platform rose just 2.1 to 1.14 trillion yuan. That was down from 2.9% growth in 2022. And I heard that their report really upset the platforms last year and triggered complaints because it depicted a very bleak picture of the Chinese consumption. And then this year, they produced a report saying the Singles' Day sales growth surged over 20%. So can you believe that? But that was like pointless because they compared the 29-day sales period to last year's 19 days. And this is ridiculous, right? So when you make comparison, it has to be apple to apple. So I guess the pressure from the platforms really worked.
That is really interesting. And I can see how if the numbers maybe aren't as good as everyone was hoping, you wouldn't be so excited to share those. If I'm not mistaken, Alibaba used to share almost minute by minute, or certainly they were much more open with their total sales over the event.
Yes. So they have, so before 2020, every year they would have this huge screen, right after midnight, you will show the real-time transaction. But then after 2020, they stopped doing that. I think there are multiple reasons behind that. Also, first of all, because of COVID, right?
Of course.
And then second, because Alibaba became one of the center targets during China's tech crackdown that started from late 2020. So afterwards, the company tried to stay a very low profile, which is a starking contrast to its previous style. And also because, as you said, this sales number is really not that, good. Yeah, showing a slow growth, it's not good. So
right.
That also kind of contributed.
It's a little bit of a vicious circle because with platforms and companies kind of taking a lower key approach, because partly perhaps because sales aren't as great as they could be, it does kind of take away some of the excitement and maybe, kind of helps push down sales even further. Just doesn't seem like it's the same event as it used to be in the past.
Yeah, it's true.
Another thing that's different this year, as you wrote, is that a lot of these platforms, instead of just focusing on domestic sales, are looking more overseas, specifically to overseas Chinese shoppers. Why would they be looking kind of specifically at overseas shoppers rather than maybe as broader markets like all of Indonesia or all of Thailand?
Yeah, that is a very good question. I think the rationale behind it is that there are around 1 million people overseas who speak Chinese, and those people are already very familiar with those big Chinese e-commerce platforms. So that is a potentially lucrative market that you don't need a lot of efforts for brand awareness. And because these groups speak Chinese, they don't have to develop a new localized app to target those people. These buyers, they can just order on the Chinese app and all goods will be shipped to them from China. And in terms of broader Southeast Asia markets, as you mentioned, like Indonesia or Thailand, so Pinduoduo already has Temu, right? The cross-border e-commerce platform.
Right.
And Alibaba has various local partners. Also, it's not very easy for Chinese companies to enter overseas markets that they are not really familiar with. For example, JD had tried to invest heavily in Indonesia before by completely copying and pasting their domestic model.
Mm-hmm.
But that was proved to be a failure because Indonesia was such a different market for JD. And now you might wonder why Temu has been kind of successful in overseas markets, right?
Right.
That is because they adopt a completely different path. They all invest heavily in local countries, but they just ship items directly from China by leveraging China's efficient retail supply chains. And that is kind of similar to what the platforms were doing during this year's Singles Day. But they were just targeting a slightly different group. Because while this model, even if the overseas market is not the right choice, they can just shift their strategy immediately.
That makes a lot of sense. So looking forward, we've already had 15 years of Singles Day in its current form.
Mm-hmm.
Do you predict that it's going to stick around for another 15 years? Or do you think that e-commerce in China will eventually evolve into something different or beyond a once a year kind of extravaganza?
I think in name, the festival will still exist, but will it be very exciting for consumers? I don't think so, because Chinese buyers have become more rational since COVID due to income reduction, let alone the competition in e-commerce sector nowadays in China is much more fierce than 15 years ago because there are more players and there are also more business models emerging, such as the live streaming or the live commerce. So meaning customers have more choices to get bargains at any time. They don't have to do it, particularly during Singles Day. And also, quite a few middle class Chinese told me that they do feel Singles Day is getting more and more tedious. And then they really get fed up with the complicated discount rules on all those platforms. And then, they might still buy some daily necessities if the discounts are very good,
right?
But they wouldn't spend as irrational as like 10 or 15 years ago.
The excitement just isn't there anymore for a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for a really fascinating look at e-commerce. And I really hope you're around for the next 15 years to keep covering it for us and telling us just what's next.
Hopefully. Thank you, Katey.
Thanks, Cissy. That's all for this week's episode. But before we sign off, I'd like to mention an upcoming Nikkei event. Please join us on November 28th for the latest installment of our webinar on the global chip industry. This time, we'll be joined by Chris Miller, best-selling author of Chip War, The Fight for the World's Most Critical Technology, as well as former South Korean Trade Minister Yeo Han-koo, and our own Chief Tech Correspondent, Cheng Ting-Fang. Register now at global-nikkei.com/chipwar. And for more of Nikkei Asia's great tech coverage, visit asia.nikkei.com. Thanks again for listening, and check back with us next week for more updates on the tech trends that matter.